Our first Tell a Sister at our shop. We have a series called Tell a Sister, which comes from tell a sister, tell a mother, tell a friend about something great. And today we are very, very lucky to have these guys. Robb and Bill. Robb doesn't like compliments. My grandmother used to say that you'd say, you know, you look very pretty today, and she'd say, I can't help it. So that's how you accept it. But I met Robb and Bill in Lyme, Connecticut, where I moved, and they were celebrities there. They really were, because they had the most fabulous house. And we have the book on Connecticut gardens, which has their gardens and was a real labor of love. And they are extremely talented. In a way, a talent that isn't like your obvious perfect garden that you see in a glossy magazine. These gardens have souls, and they're like, on their own, they're just magic. So that's the way I would describe what they do. And they recently moved here, so sadly they're not my neighbor anymore, but they're your guys' neighbor, and they're meeting a lot of people. They just bought a big piece of property in Colebrook. And
so a lot of people here would say that's not Litchfield, but it's closer to Massachusetts.
But in the country, everything within 50 miles is kind of like neighbors, isn't it? Just things are so far apart. Yes. So I thought we'd like this today to be really interactive for people who have any questions. You can weave them in if we're all talking about something that's particularly of interest to you. Then just dive in, raise your hand. Please. But please, Robb.
We need all the help we can get.
But we just wanted to kind of start with Robb and Bill talking about how they got into gardening and their work in Atlanta.
We don't do gardening.
Oh, I forgot your food. Okay, Robb, into cooking. No, I know Robb went to horticultural school, and I don't know about you, Bill. So just very brief about how you got into what you do now.
Well, I grew up in a big family, so the garden was an escape. And my dad worked at Aetna at the time in Hartford, and I remember we went to the greenhouse. I was like 9 years old, and it just transformed my life to be in the dead of winter and be in this greenhouse filled with plants. And it did. It just changed everything, and it never stopped. I mean, everything I did was related to gardening, and then I went to a technical school and studied plant science because...
In Connecticut, right?
In Connecticut, because I didn't think my parents could afford to go to college, so I just said, I'll just get as much education as I can. And then I got scholarships from my teachers and different things, so I went to UConn and studied horticulture. Then the day after, I skipped town and went south, and that's where I met Bill. And
we met in a greenhouse of all.
Nice. I didn't know that.
You did.
That's amazing. So great.
I was in the restaurant business, and one of our restaurants had a greenhouse that went the entire length of the dining room. And he did the plants for it. It was incredible. It was like a jungle in there, and everybody wanted to be up against the greenhouse when they went there, so that's how we met. And my passion for garden really was from my maternal grandparents, who lived really close to me. It was a 10-minute bike ride, and I loved going over to their house and hearing their stories. And I would go to garden tours with them and to different nurseries. We used to go down to Thomasville, Georgia for roses.
I've been there.
Down there. So beautiful.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
And so that's how my passion for gardening came about. And then I've had a great teacher here. I mean, he is so knowledgeable and is good at sharing that.
So it kind of sounds like one is born a gardener,
Yeah, I think so.
Both of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But there's hope. There's hope. Right? So what about your business in Georgia? What was that comprised of? What were your clients like?
I love this story because, in youth, you have no fear and you can sort of do anything. But Robb moved to Atlanta, and there was a mall in Atlanta, Georgia. Have any of you been to Atlanta or know Atlanta well? And it's called Lenox Mall. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. at the time, it was sort of a big deal because malls are everywhere now, but this was a beautiful mall and it had great anchor stores like Neiman Marcus and different things. And he had heard about it in Connecticut. And he was visiting, he went there and was looking around and he thought the plant material there looked really, really bad.
That's all I was looking at. I couldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, even though Ralph Lauren was there, Laura Ashley, and all this, I was looking at the plant material.
Is it in Buckhead?
It's in
Yes.
Buckhead, it's
Yeah.
in the heart of Buckhead.
Okay.
It really is sort of what made Buckhead in a way.
Yeah. Okay.
And so he went to the management office, which was in the bowels of the building, and had to really go searching for it, and told the management. He's like 20, how old are you? 21. And they said, well, we're taking bids on somebody new taking over the account. He put in a bid and he got the job. And so the business sort of grew from there.
I love that so
I
much,
just-
Rob.
And what's weird is, again, I mean, I ended up with 7 malls, and I did it
Wow.
all myself.
Wow.
I mean, I would literally start at 2 o'clock in the morning
Yeah.
and just go around, and
And where were you sourcing all the plants? Did you?
I had different vendors that I
Yeah.
would bring up from South,
Yeah.
From Florida and different
Yeah.
things. But and then because of that, I ended up getting like Ralph Lauren's windows and Laura Ashley and
Wow.
all these
What,
other
how amazing.
shops. So I was
What
doing their
great
stuff.
advertising.
Do you remember
Yeah.
what Ralph's vibe then was? Was it the English country
It
look?
was,
So
it
you were
was.
doing all
Yeah.
those kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with little props and things.
Right, of course.
That's why our barn's so packed you can't move, because he calls it our prop room.
No, like I will just interject to say that I hadn't seen Rob and Bill, and I was standing in line in front of this country market, and I look up, and Rob's in a U-Haul buying more antiques. They haven't even moved all their stuff yet.
I know, it's sick. I mean,
Bill's
if you-
like,
Our landlord, we moved into a rental, and our landlord, who was a friend, came to visit, and she said, "My God, it's like a storage unit in here," and we just kept buying.
And then she said, "Are you starting a nursery?" Because there were certain things I wanted, so we had to go get them early and store them there before we could transport them to the new place. And
these are our
anyways.
people.
We've driven a lot of U-Hauls.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
we
at some
all
point,
have.
we're going to talk about the antiquing opportunities here. But, okay, this is a heavy question, which we don't have to answer. But what characteristics have you seen in a person that's reflected in their gardens?
oh, that's easy.
So you really think
I
it's
mean,
a matchup?
when you go to a garden, you can really see what's in somebody's head.
Yeah. Like,
You really
like
can.
if someone's anal.
Like, it's funny
or-
because even in the Garden Conservancy, which we love and we're part of, we would go to some of these gardens and, it's like all petunias. And, but it's still pretty. And that's their view of a garden. And so it's interesting. It's just different people's concept. And that's why you can't,
Yeah.
you can't judge because everybody has a different aesthetic.
Right. Well, what?
But like when you see
Yeah.
a lot of chaos,
yeah.
and you see a lot of, we like stuff, but you have to have some kind of order or some
Yeah.
type of pattern with
Yeah.
it. But you know what's going on
Yeah.
there. There's a woman, I shouldn't even say, but remember the one. And her garden just went on and on and on and on, remember?
Yeah, it was.
It was near where
and
you
once
used to
you got
live.
to know her, she was a lovely person, but her head went on and on.
Oh, she's an ADD
But it was a
garden.
fascinating garden.
Because you saw, you were seeing what she was thinking about and the things she would acquire. It was fascinating.
But a garden really is like decorating. It's like decorating a house,
Totally.
and it does say a lot about someone's personality and what they like. Are they
Color,
structured?
no
Are they more
color.
free flowing? Are they straight lines? Or are they, curves?
Right.
But I do feel like, and the same thing with a house, when you go to see someone, when you leave their home, you should feel like you know a little bit about them or what their passions are. And the same thing with the garden. And you can tell if a gardener is really in the garden or if it's just there to be seen. And
You mean that they just have a
Definitely.
gardener?
Like if
just
their
have a
nails are
garden.
dirty.
No, it's
Well,
true.
that-
Yeah.
or if they really, is it really a reflection of them, or did they just have someone design it and do
Like
it?
I always
Right.
say, a checkbook garden, or
Yeah.
because there's
Yeah.
a lot of. I mean, that's how our business was. So we appreciate that.
We never
But
insult our
I
clients.
always say,
Yeah.
it's all up to how deep is your checkbook.
Right.
I mean, people say, "Can you?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah."
Depends on what you have.
But some of my favorite gardens, you know, are really simple gardens, like, you know, not much bigger than this space, or can be beautiful. So much more
Tell them about the
interesting
guy in
than,
North Carolina.
like, Pearl Fryer. Does anybody know who he is? You know, he
He's
was,
somebody nobody thinks about. But
he
he's-
I
retired.
love his name.
Pearl Fryer, and his garden is now being held in conservancy because it's so interesting. But he lived in this sort of simple. He's not far from Charleston, and he lives in this sort of simple red brick house. I think he worked for an electric company as a lineman, and he would go to nurseries and plants that they were throwing away, especially evergreens. He would take them and he would plant them in his yard, in his front yard, just all over. And he started sculpturing them.
But when he would buy those evergreens, he could see images in them, and he created the most unbelievable topiary garden, and to where you have to climb huge orchard ladders to trim them. And he's this
Wow.
little black
Small
man,
man.
and he's so into it, and he just loves it. And you could see that you have to love it when you see how much he puts into it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean, you.
totally.
It's beautiful
Yeah.
imagination.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And he was obviously not trained in
But
any
what-
way.
He
He's
wasn't. He
self-trained.
trained himself.
Yeah,
But I love it that he's gotten the accolades.
yeah. Okay, so let's flip to, Eliza had this question, the most extravagant gardens.
Obviously.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
one of the most extravagant, I think, was the one we went to, Cabot, who started the Garden Conservancy.
Frank Cabot?
Oh,
Cabot.
in Canada?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that's
Lamau Bay.
amazing. Yeah.
It's, and now there's a checkbook
It's
garden.
Olivia's
I don't know. Have you seen that garden? It's
No, I-
Quatre Vents, and it's a garden too that just evolved, and it started near the house with his, I think it's his wife's parents' house or something, and it sort of just grew and evolved, and just it's spectacular. But again, you're walking through this man's head when you see it, because all of this came to him.
But it's done right because they have the funds to do it and would redo it if it wasn't. And they have the land.
A
And it
lot
was
of garden clubs
just
go to it.
unbelievable.
Yeah,
You have to make a
Yeah.
reservation like a year in advance
Yeah.
to get there.
yeah.
But it's worth it. It really is worth it.
Now, what do you think of Bunny Mellon's whole approach? And
Love it.
yeah, because your garden room reminds me of her baskets and
That's somebody with passion and who
Yeah.
really,
got in the dirt.
gets it.
And
Yeah.
did it in such a beautiful way. I mean, she did have a lot of funds to work with, but it was also, she could have done this really over the top type of thing, but it was very understated, just
Mm-hmm. Right.
like her interiors.
Right.
And her gardens, just like her interiors, said a lot about who she was.
Right.
You know. And so it's funny that you brought her up, because I think she's been one of our greatest inspirations.
Yeah. No, I haven't been to her gardens in Virginia. Have you guys?
We have not, but
Yeah.
we would love
You've got to
do.
go to that.
I
Yeah.
have a question, and I don't know anything about gardening, and I want to learn more, and obviously I'm really passionate about interior design, but when I think about how to decorate a house, I always think about where the house is located, and like what's appropriate for that house. Like, so when you move from like lime to here, are you thinking about different types of plants and
It's really important. I think
Yeah.
that's such a
Exciting.
great question.
yeah, and like how do you, as someone who wants to start a garden, think about, how do you start?
Well, it sounds so
Yeah.
cliche, but it really does speak to you.
Yeah,
The property you have,
yeah,
it'll tell you what you need,
okay.
where you need it.
So the
I like
first
that.
thing, you need to live there for a year before you make any major decisions.
Okay,
But I always say the first thing you do is plant your trees, because
right.
They
we're all
take
getting
longer.
older, and
Yeah.
you want those trees.
So you mean like smaller
People
trees?
wait 5 years, and
or-
it's like,
Or
oh, I
like-
should
like
plant
small
trees,
or
and it's
bigger
like,
trees.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But what about, like, Eliza's probably thinking too, like, where do I put a terrace or a porch?
Or
Like,
Well, the
or
biggest
how
thing
to-
there is
Exposure.
exposure.
Right,
Exposure.
exposure.
Because you don't want hot afternoon sun, so you
Yeah.
want
Right.
either the house to shade it or a tree to shade it.
Yeah, and then also I just think about I'm sure there are there certain things you're excited to plant here that you didn't plant in your previous garden, or are we
I
yeah,
really love this question
Yeah.
Yeah.
because we looked at 200 homes before we bought this last house. I mean, our realtor would see us coming, and I'm sure he just thought, "Oh dear God, they're back." But we ended up finally buying one, And he was actually great to work with. He was, I'll just tell you real quickly, he was sort of like a Paul Lynde character. Does everybody know who Paul Lynde was?
Yes.
And we would meet a lot of times at the GW in Washington, and he would down 2 Pinot Grigios, which said more about us than it did him. And then we would be out on the road, you know, going everywhere. But he was so much fun.
Cracking jokes the whole time.
But we would look at a place, and we would stalk it. We would go there like at 5 in the morning to see the sun coming up, because it is all about exposure.
Okay.
But, you know, now, the way the market is, you didn't have that opportunity, because if you found something, you better jump, because,
Yeah.
which kind of leaves you a little, because you're like, you know, was there something else out there? And you always think there's something better, but you just have to trust your gut.
Right.
So tell us about the place that you bought.
Well, it was a sheep farm. It was a 260-acre sheep farm, and the beauty is the mindset all along on the land, because when 2 owners back bought it, he subdivided it. And I know everybody's like, oh my God, you know, but he sold 160 acres across the street, and the people built a mile back in the woods. He sold 50 acres next to us, and they're a mile back in the woods. And then there was an old barn right across the street, and a carriage house for this house, for like caretakers. When the folks we bought it from, they put in the contract that they wanted those torn down, because they wanted the view not to be obstructed. And the owner before that even buried the power lines right in front of the house. So we felt like that was a big draw, because if, you know, you don't have to look at, like, we have 40 neighbors across the street, but they all have tails. They're cows. So it's kind of nice, because it's hard to find that, you know, and there's things that we wish the house had or didn't have.
What year is the house?
1795.
Wow.
And they made an L was added onto the back in the 1930s, and I love that 1920s, 1930s period. They did really nice work then. And it has this really nice terrace on the left-hand side.
And the first thing the painter says, you want me to pressure wash that? Because it's filled with lichen. And we're like, no. Anyways.
But it's been a lot of fun, and it's, I think we really like a project. And so I think people thought, how do you sell your home like this? We had neighbors who said, how can you just sell your home? But it was the right time. We wanted to do something different. And we fell in love with this place.
And if you don't do it at a certain age, you don't do it.
It's true.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I wish. And
Yeah.
I don't want to regret anything, you know. Even though I'm regretting it a little bit.
If you saw what we were living in, it's a mess.
Yeah.
Ceilings pulled out. But we had gone to look at a house in Colebrook, and it was a shingled house built around 1900, and had this beautiful dairy barn, gorgeous land. And we were looking around, and the agent said, but I need to show you this. So we go around to the back of the dairy barn, and the entire back half was collapsed and the house needed a lot of work. So we left, and I said, let's just drive into Colebrook and see the town. And we were driving up the road, and we passed this house, which is now our house. And I said, why can't that be for sale? You know, this is what we're looking for. And he was like so persistent looking on the internet for houses, and it popped up, and it was for sale.
What did Paul Lynde say?
Well, he was no longer our agent.
Oh, he
I think Paul Lynde retired after us. He said, I can't do this anymore. He may have even had a series of shock therapy that he had to go into after we left.
He's in rehab.
Yeah, right.
He was actually great.
I love it when real estate's not hot, because you really can take your time and
Yeah.
find the right thing.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Well, what about I love old garden gates and just sort of antique garden stuff. Where have you been poking around here looking for that? What have you had time looking for places that you're going to be
We don't need
antiquing?
anything else.
We just
I know,
have so much
I know
stuff.
you don't, but I know you love to look.
Yeah, we will never stop looking.
Yeah.
You know, I think, was it Albert Hadley who said, you know, when he got to a point when he would buy something that he loved, he would give something away.
Yes.
And we unfortunately have not learned that lesson. But I
We
think-
never will.
But I think that's something that we need to maybe start doing. We're not really actively looking for new garden ornaments.
But if you were
But you'll be
instructing
surprised where
someone
you can-
around here,
you'll
you
be
know well enough,
surprised
it's like
where you
I,
can-
yeah,
yeah.
where would you go if you
Like
were?
even up in Hudson, there's a great, in the town of Hudson,
Yeah.
all the way at the end, there's a wonderful antique
you
place
been to
back
It's
that
there.
like it's like a warehouse.
And
Oh,
it's-
I've been in there. I
And
love
it's
it.
filled
It's fun.
with stuff.
Yeah,
It's
that's
real
in
hit and
Hudson.
miss, but you can
Yeah.
find some interesting
Huge.
stuff.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is it?
filled.
I don't
it's
even know what
just,
it's called.
and I
It's
like
big
those kind of places
Antique
that,
warehouse.
you know,
Yeah.
That's an
You know?
antique warehouse.
Oh, that's what it is.
yeah.
Okay.
So stuff like those kind of places I think are neat because it's,
Yeah.
there's enough there that if you take your time. And you really have to, look up and really.
Yeah,
And
you have
New
to ask if there's a
Preston-
back place
Yeah.
too.
New Preston has a shop called River Song. Have any of you been to River Song in New Preston? They're sort of hard to see, but you know where the owl is in New Preston? There, if you go up to their parking lot back there, you can walk a little bit through their parking lot, and they're up on a hill. You can't even see them.
You wouldn't even know
They're
that.
directly across the street from Privet House and up on a hill. But they have really great garden type things like old finials and
Yeah, that's what I
beautiful-
mean, like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
and
they're
beautiful outdoor chairs. They had a beautiful set of 4 Regency style garden chairs that had a
Tall?
beautiful patina
Metal?
on the metal.
Yeah.
Yeah, just really, really pretty. And then if you want to spend a lot of money, there's Elemental Garden, which has the best.
Yeah.
I mean, they just have
And
great
Woodbury.
finds. But
These are good.
but you need to take out a second mortgage.
Okay, okay. I have a practical question, then Liz, I want you to ask one. Our house in Lyme is right on the road, it's an old house. And it has that lilac hedge. It
Beautiful
has-
lilac
yeah,
hedge.
But we would love to do something for the road noise. So where would
Where's
you
your
go?
husband?
Yeah, that's his question.
We just
I
had
I think
already
he's
had a
behind,
talk
he's
with him.
behind the Wizard of Oz. For,
Googling checkbook
yeah,
garden.
he is.
No, I tell you.
Like, what would you guys do?
I tell you, well,
we might have a difference of opinion
Yes,
on
give me
this.
your different takes.
My opinion is,
and I agree with him.
it is what it
Doug's
is.
listening.
There you are.
It is what it is, and if you've seen their house, I mean, the road it's on is one of the most beautiful roads. On our first trip up here, we stayed at an inn which is no longer there, and I used to say, let's drive up 156 because we just kept going back and forth. It's just beautiful. And then they overlook this vineyard, which is incredible.
But see, you're in the
So-
same
but
situation
it's
where
like-
you all,
I don't hear it as much.
That's what I was
but
gonna
it's in
say.
the summer when
It's
and
way
it's
more
spring
in the
when the
summer.
motorcycles come
It's
if
out.
I was
motorcycle.
if I was in your situation, and this is totally not having anything to do with gardening.
You're gonna
all
say
right?
move into the barn.
No,
Yeah.
for what you paid, I would cash in.
You think we could flip
I
it?
think you can make easily 500,000. Easily, I swear.
That's not what you were
Wheeling
expecting.
it.
No, but but there comes a point where if that bothers you enough, and you know you have value there, then that's what
Yeah.
you do.
No, I think we're
Got
at
a house off the
a
road,
like
yeah.
a 3 on bothering, but
Yeah.
it's something we think about. But I'm hearing you, Rob. Like,
This is my thing.
Right.
let's talk more.
I mean, it's a great house.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like he said, it's a great area.
yeah,
It's really a fabulous
But
area.
but
And when
you're
you-
in a great situation because you bought smart.
yeah.
So
But my
Yeah.
take is, it's sort of like living in the city. You know, we would go in to visit friends, and I would always take earplugs with me. And they would be, we don't hear anything. You know, you get used to it.
Yeah.
You get used to the noise, and it just
But
fades
we don't
away.
hear it in the house. It's when we have drinks outside.
But I think when you start trying to hide it,
Mhm.
it looks like you're trying to hide it. Like people put up those privacy fences, which
Yeah.
I would rather have the noise.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
they put up-
And
No, I hear you.
There's a lot of arborvitae.
yeah, you do
So
have
is that-
that. So that's a good thing.
that's and that arborvitae.
Is that what those big trees are?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's
Is
incredible,
that's-
and to have
is that a
the age on
typical
that? Yeah.
solution?
I think a lot of people do that for privacy, and they
But
clip
it's not
very
going to
well.
block.
Do
it's
any
not
of
gonna-
you guys have
It's not
houses
gonna
right
block
on
the
the road?
noise.
Old house.
I mean, we're
Yeah.
right on the road now. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a little hard to take because we were set off
Yeah.
the road.
Yeah.
But you compromise too.
Yeah.
And that's what Bill's saying. I mean, you just get to a point where if you love certain things enough, you
Yes.
just compromise.
Yeah.
But when a truck goes by, I'm like this, because we never saw anybody
Yeah.
before.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
you know,
that's true.
then he has to give me shock there.
Yeah.
I look at the way your house sits up there, that lilac hedge,
Yeah.
that barn complex.
Her
you
Yeah.
barn
can't
complex,
Yeah.
let me tell
That's
you what,
cool.
that's
That's what
why I
the
said you
focus
could
is.
cash in on
Yeah.
it easily.
I know.
I mean,
Those
you
are
really
great.
can, and that's a good point to be. That's
Yeah.
where we all want to be. That we're
Yeah.
not there anymore because
Yeah.
all our money's into this stupid
Yeah.
house.
Yeah. No, and it's going to get worse.
It's already gotten worse.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to, let's get
Yeah,
off
let's
the
move
real
on.
Let me
estate.
just say this
Before I
real
slip
quick.
my wrist.
Yeah.
When we were looking for a house and we were looking in that area, it wasn't Paul Lynn who was helping us in this, down in Old Line.
Yeah.
But we looked at a house on Sill Lane, which is not too far from
Yeah.
you. And we were in the back and Rob said, "What's that noise?" And our agent said, "That's 95. It's the traffic on 95." And the listing agent said, "Doesn't it sound like a waterfall?"
Because it was on the river, so the sound just carried right up the
Yeah.
river. And here you weren't near 95,
Yeah,
but
pretty far.
you know, so
Yeah, there's always something.
there's always
And I
something.
love the
I'm telling you,
broker
you
lingo.
never
It's so
like look at you,
Water.
the house
Yeah,
we
but
talked
that's
about next to
pretty,
you.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty funny, yeah.
I mean, you know, but you'd have to really open your wallet.
100%.
Okay, my last question, maybe we could open it up afterwards, is what about gardens at night? Like lighting in gardens, how to make that attractive or any insight
Tips.
into that?
I'm not a huge fan of lighting
So no
because it looks so
lights.
it looks so
So no
red.
one does
So
Your candles.
if you do
Like
any
if you
kind
don't
of
wanna have a
lighting,
party at night,
there's a
it's not
light
close to
called
the
there's
house.
lighting they do in trees called moonlighting.
Yeah.
And it's real inconspicuous and it's real soft and it literally looks like moon glow. And I like that because it's first of all one bulb, one thing to deal with, you know, and then it gets a big area instead of all these little.
Yeah, what about
down
like
lighting.
if you need like up for like a path to your house at night? You would probably put them, I don't know.
I think along a path, you know, like we had these little copper lights, which we left at the old house with little caps on them, and it was a real low light.
But it was filled with boxwood, so you couldn't
You
even
couldn't
see
really
it.
see them.
So it was just a little.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of lighting in the garden.
Okay.
What about your room that you guys built? Your
That was his
entertaining.
50th birthday party.
I
Oh, no,
love that.
that's up on
Describe
the
that. I
hill.
don't think there's a picture in the book, but there
No.
there
We
is one
built,
in the
this was the
quintessence.
first thing we built, and this was an open field when we bought the house, and there was a little flat area right here, and it just sort of screamed for a structure, a little building. And we kept, in the back of this, it had a tool storage area where we kept tools, and it was just a great little folly, you know, it was a great place to get out of the sun, and it was always cool in there, and we built a citrus terrace off to the side of it. But then up on this hill, we built, it sounds so pretentious, but we called it the temple. And
But
we,
it didn't start. First, we did the fire
I
pit,
wish we had a picture of it.
and we did the fire pit because we thought, oh, good, it's up on a hill. There's no gardening, so you could really relax
Yeah.
and not think about anything.
Yeah.
But then once we
So-
were up there, we were like, well, you got to have a structure.
So it was in a field.
it was
Yeah.
on the top of a knoll in an
Okay.
open area.
Yeah.
And it had no electricity. It had it was sort of like a temple form, but I called it architectural illiteracy. I can't remember where I read that time, but I would sketch it off and our contractor would build it. But I didn't want it to look too perfect because the house was a real simple farmhouse, 1732. And if you started doing that, it wouldn't
Right.
look right for the house.
Yeah.
But we loved having dinners up there. It was screened in.
It's like a
all
party room.
candlelight.
Yes, it was all. That's what I mean. It
Filled
was
with
all
plants.
candles. Did you have a fireplace in it?
We
Oh,
had
we
a
had the
fire
fire
pit
pit.
out
Pit
front.
outside.
Yeah.
And how many people could you seat at the table?
About
I mean,
10.
But we would always do 6 or 8.
Yeah, and so you'd walk everything up from the house.
Yeah.
I kind of love that though.
It was, it was, we
It's
would carry everything up there, and everybody would sort of pitch in and carry something up.
Right.
Yeah.
It was fun.
And we did, for lighting, to answer your question, because it was up there and there was
Right.
no electric, we did do those torches, but we
Right.
did the natural torches, and
Yes.
they were like in the ground, and so you just saw this flame, and we would take people up there at dusk, and then when I would go down to like get dessert or whatever, I would light them coming up, so then when they left, all of a sudden, you know, it was all
Dream.
Wow.
lit up. So it was kind. It was.
See, that makes
This-
entertaining like an
This is- yeah, I
adventure
love
too.
this.
It was like
You know?
theater, you know.
Yeah, like theater.
That's theater.
You know, but
That's
it was
what you need,
the
Liz.
again, to go back to your other question, it was the topography that spoke to us. Knew, you know, like this was just a 5-acre tract that we bought after we bought our house, and it was a thicket of trees, and even somebody said, you know, there's a quarry on the property, and you know, most people think how negative, but I thought, oh, stone. You know,
Yeah, let's grab
but
it.
what it was is the guy who bought the land wanted to build, because you could see the water from up on the hill, and he was trying to blast it to build his foundation. Finally, after 3 years, he gave up. So, anyways, we built that up there, and I lost my train of thought, so I don't know what I was going to say.
We got great stone out of that quarry. We built walls and foundations and everything out of that.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to say. So then we created these paths, you know, nice grass paths, but everything else was natural. And then you went up there and you saw this perched up on the hill, and it kind of, it spoke to the land, and it kind of made it all work.
Yeah, it's like decorating. You don't want it to look decorated.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Right. That's the hardest part.
Yeah,
making it
when
look
you go in a
natural.
house and it's too done, or it's like a, I don't really want, you know, some of these box stores that, you know,
Yeah.
they just put everything
It
in
was
there.
a mode
Yeah.
path that led
Right.
up to
Yeah.
it.
Anyways,
We
Yeah.
took a lot of, you know, liberties and copied a lot of people. Like at Bunny Williams has the grasses and her mode path going up to her temple, and we did the same thing there. The big grasses going up, and they, you know, they were huge, and you were walking between them going up, and it was really pretty. The other great thing about that spot for us was it was a place where you could go and you couldn't see the garden, so there you couldn't tell that anything needed clipped or weeded, and you could really sort of get away for a little
What kind
bit.
of meals would you guys serve up there?
All
meals that
different
could
kinds of
transport,
things.
Anything you could
like
transport.
lasagna.
Yeah.
What's the chicken marbella?
Oh,
We serve
yeah.
a lot of chicken
Oh,
marbella.
yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, things like that.
Yeah. Well, we have more questions, but does anybody out here have any? We can go back to ours if we don't. No gardening questions.
Well, I still have a question.
Yeah.
So you, when you're in the garden, how do you stop gardening and enjoy it? Do you have that problem? Because I mean,
I'll tell you,
That's a good question.
that's, you know how you do that? You move. No, I swear, because all we did is garden. I mean, from sun up, I mean, we would walk out with a cup of coffee to enjoy it. And then you see a weed, and you know, our big thing was never let a weed go to seed. And we had that property where really we got very few weeds, because we always would eradicate them when they were like small. So you never had any new seeds coming up. So doing that and keeping the trimming up and shifting stuff, and then this needs water, this needs Epsom salt, this needs that. And then you go out thinking, I'm just going to do this today, and then you see a fungus in the lawn, or mites on the privet, or fungus in the boxwood, you know, and it's like you just you know, we're both like kind of anal and crazy, so you want it perfect, and you're constantly, like, even all these outbuildings, as much as we loved them, you know, I would bleach the floors. I was like an old peasant woman up there, you know, on my knees, you know, because you want it clean, you know, and you know, it's like crazy.
It smelled like a Clorox factory.
What did you use the Epsom salts for?
Fruit citrus trees, they love it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How much do you dilute?
Handfuls. I just put it around the soil and
Oh, you just put-
scratch it in,
And
then water
every
it.
time you water them, it's greening them up,
Oh.
because it's magnesium. Or you could soak your feet in it and then throw the water in it. Then you
After
get
you've done the floors.
Then you get a twofer.
We really did enjoy the garden, though, and I know
We
what
did
you're
enjoy
saying. And my favorite thing, and the special time of day, because we would get up early in the morning, like 4:35, and get started because we love the morning. And we would go in different directions. You know, it's not like we were saying what's on your list. We just did our thing. But at the end of the day, as the sun's going down, and to have a glass of wine and to sort of walk around and share what each did, that was really a beautiful
See,
time.
we're
I
only
love it.
25, but we look so old.
Wearing us out.
We're wore out.
No, it was so much fun. It really was. And I'm
It's a
so
blast.
glad
You should
somebody
all
else is
try
having
it.
fun.
I wonder what they're doing with those gardens.
Well, this is what's so funny. We did it all,
The
okay?
people from
And the
Miami.
guy who bought the house,
Yeah.
thank God he's got deep pockets. He calls us, texts us the other day, and he says, "The gardener just for a month was $12,000 just to maintain the garden." And I'm like, well, you know, everything grows.
Yes,
Constantly needs.
it's not stopping. Really. So they're maintaining them though.
They weren't
love
at
the
first,
garden.
and I went
Okay,
over
good.
there and had to come to
Oh, you
Jesus.
did. Okay. Okay, good.
I mean, yeah. They were really wonderful, though. They let us. We had two like greenhouses there, and an extra big black barn, and they let us keep all our garden stuff in that black barn. It was packed, and all our plants there for 7 months.
That's.
I mean, so that was huge. So
Yeah.
I would go over to water them, and every time I'd walk around and make my list and say, "You need to do this." You need but they enjoyed it. It made them feel good because they knew we really cared for the place.
They were so nice and generous to let us do that
Yeah.
because we had no place to take these things
Yeah.
or put them in. They're a wonderful couple and they love the house, so that makes us feel
It's
good.
good. But we had a greenhouse in the house that I grew up in. It was like the carriage house to a big house. So there was a big room, like the size of this store, with
Yeah, your mom
trees
was
growing
telling
in
me
it.
about
Yeah,
that.
and you could be there all year.
I love that.
Yeah, it's like an English greenhouse.
I
guess.
love that.
Are you guys thinking about ever building one?
Well, we were until the contractor and the electrician and the plumber. So now what we're gonna do, I mean, really, I really wanted a greenhouse
Yeah.
this time, but we had this before too, and we called it a warming shed. And it's really I think it's a good compromise. Instead of, greenhouses can be expensive. And, who can afford,
Yeah.
150, 200,000?
Yeah.
And then it's only, used part-time, and you gotta worry about the glass maintenance and
Right.
all that. So we just build like these structures and fill it with glass.
Just panes.
3 sides. And, that's all you really need.
Yeah.
And it's so much more cost-effective, and it's
Right.
aesthetic,
Right.
and you don't have to worry as much as,
And you can have dinners in them.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
so that's the plan.
I think we have time for one more question. Does
Yeah.
anyone else have a question or?
Did you manage your garden, just the two of you?
Just the two, we did everything, the trimming, the spraying, the mowing, the planting. It's crazy. We were actually living in Atlanta at the time when we bought it. And we'd go back and forth. And this is where everybody in Hadlime said, they'll never last, that this is gonna get old. People in Atlanta said, how are they gonna do this?
Including your parents.
But we did it for until his parents died, and then Bill stayed up there full time. But we would go up there for 5 days. And literally, as soon as we arrived, no matter what time, we would just start clipping like madmen. And we'd get it so perfect, and then we'd leave. And it would kind of bother us because we thought the girl who's taking care of our cat is enjoying it better than. And then we'd come back 2 weeks later and it'd be a mess again, and we'd have to bring it back. But every time we'd leave and come back, we came back with fresh eyes. And that was the best thing, because things we thought were so perfect, when we come back, we'd like, that's too suburban, or that's too this.
I thought you were going to say the opposite. Things we didn't love so much look even better.
Oh no, we'd rip it out.
We would rip out
just
a lot.
Rip it out,
Somebody
yeah.
would say, "Oh, how's your cranberry cordifolia doing?" I'd say, "Oh, we moved that." I mean,
Okay, so you're in favor of ripping out.
Oh, you have to,
movement.
and you
Yeah.
have to see it
Change
with
There's like a
fresh
chair
eyes.
in a house,
Right.
Yeah.
We
Right.
moved an arbor 3 times, and when I say move it, it was like a foot. And, we moved it, but it was lined up with this window and a stairway that you went up, and when you went up, you looked out this window, and
Yeah.
it sort of looked good.
Yeah.
But I think that really made the garden, because we, back and forth, and we saw it differently.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Like a house, if you. If you
And of
leave
course,
it.
every time we would come back, it was a U-Haul full of plants.
Mhm.
But that was the other thing. We wouldn't even play the radio the whole. It was a 16-hour drive, and we would just plan and talk and decide what we were going to do.
So how many years total were you there?
And 16, 17.
17, yeah.
Wow. So
As soon as we got it right, we moved.
That's what I'm wondering. But they need to
And
divide
everybody
things,
is very
right?
sad
What's
they
that?
They need to
moved.
divide things when they,
I tell you,
so what happened to all those?
the perennials were like, they're like shrubs. You know how they grow here, especially down there in Hadlime. The temperature's so much warmer.
Yeah.
And
It's a
constant.
great climate for gardening,
Yeah.
perennial gardening. We took
Pressure.
things like, things that had come from my grandparents and my parents' garden, you know, we took some roots from there just to have that. But, thanks. But, you know, Paige Dickey, do any of you know Paige Dickey or familiar with her? She wrote this, she was a huge inspiration to us in visiting her garden. And her latest book, Uprooted, I don't know if any of you read it, but when I had talked to Rob for like 3 years that this day is coming, we can't keep doing this. And
Then you had a meniscus issue.
and then, you know, like I did, and so when one of you is the only one out there being able to do it, it was really time consuming. So,
Yeah.
and when I read her book, it really gave us permission to do that. And it also gave us permission to do a different type of garden. You know, we're doing more natural open fields
Oh,
and
you are?
letting
Okay.
things grow up
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
type of thing, keeping it small.
Yeah, I like that.
It's fun to do something
Yeah.
different.
It's
And you
something
have
new.
to, I mean, if you're gonna take care of it, you have to make it where it's less,
Right.
Right. Okay.
Well, I could talk forever,
Yeah.
so we'll,
Thank you so
we'll
much for doing
keep talking.
this.
it.
Thank you for
Thank you all for coming.
Yes,
Thank
you.
you.
That was awesome. It was easy, right? Yeah. Nice.